Welcome back to nsEOX TV. We're back with another episode on my Porsche 996, also known as Little Irish. Today's episode, I'm going to be investigating a topic I said I'd never ever go near. That's engine upgrades for the troublesome M96 flat 6. Okay then, so to get into it, I've always said it's never a good idea to touch the M96 coded flat 6 in the back of the Porsche 996 Carrera. It's better to just be left alone. They have a reputation, whether it's IMS, RMS, scored bores, the list goes on and the internet will bore you with all the stories. Therefore, I've always said it's best to leave the engine as is. 300 horsepower for the Gen 1, 320 horsepower for the Gen 2. It's more than respectable in my book, considering these cars weigh around about 1,300 kilos. Regular visitors to this channel will know I'm an evangelist for these cars, in particularly with reference to their power to weight ratio for fast road driving, where it's engaging and you can have some fun. However, an area I am interested in looking at is breathing, just letting this flat 6 breathe a little bit better. That's without going into any major engine upgrades where you have to start pulling the engine apart. Don't forget the dry sump Metzger flat 6s in the GT3 and turbos. That's a very different story because it's a different engine, okay? So let's discard those for this episode and just concentrate on Carreras. So this episode, I'm going to be investigating a couple of engine upgrades on Little Irish. As I say, all under the theme of breathing. We're going to be putting in a K&M panel filter. We're going to be installing a Helmholtz resonator bypass kit. Hopefully by the end of the episode I'll be able to pronounce that properly. And last but not least, we're going to be fitting this new plenum from IPD. Now, I'm most excited about this. I've actually had this on side for a couple of months now, and I've since read a lot of conjecture online as to just how effective these are. So what we're going to be doing in true Lee Sibley journalism style is putting this to the test. We're going to put Little Irish in stock form on the dyno and get a power output reading. We're then going to fit the IPD plenum on the rolling road, so it's going to be the same environment, etc, etc. And then we're going to get another dyno reading, so we'll have back-to-back before and after power readouts to decide just how effective this IPD plenum really is. So it's time to get up the road to a rolling road and get these mods on side. Wish me luck. In case you've not heard of IPD's products, the Y-shaped IPD plenum replaces the factory T-shape equivalent, which it says improves performance by channeling air left and right to the flat 6's cylinder banks more efficiently. IPD says the design reduces airflow turbulence and increases airflow velocity, resulting in substantial power gains across the RPM band. As with any mechanical modification outside of a turbocharger, in isolation the gains aren't really going to be huge, hence K&N's performance panel filter being included here. Some then fit larger throttle bodies too to harness the power hike. All these items, by the way, were purchased via the nsEOX.co.uk shop, which stocks over 60,000 Porsche parts from a variety of vendors. I'll leave a direct link in the description below so you can check it out. For my dyno test, I visited Harding Auto Services in Woking. A second generation family business, Harding Auto Services really is a one-stop shop for all cars from 1920 right the way up to the present day, catering for everything from road maintenance to full race spec vehicles, and even has its own engine build shop where the company manufactures engines and other parts on its own CNC machines to incredible accuracy. Very cool to watch, by the way. In short, it's a great place for me to come and conduct a proper test. Today the company is headed up by Mike Harding, who had the 996 strapped and chained down to the floor, its rear wheels on the rolling road. It's worth pointing out a previous owner had this 996 remapped in 2010, giving it a 20 horsepower boost. Let's see if it's still at 320 horses in total. All set, it was time to get the wheels in motion for our test, with our first of 2 runs using the stock plenum and air filter. 2 runs, I sat down with Mike to discuss the results. Science. This morning for me has all been about science so far. It has opened my eyes up considerably. What have we learned really in kind of a synopsis?
Whenever we get a car in here, we're always looking to make sure that first of all we're dealing with a healthy engine, making sure we don't have any problems with misfiring, misfueling, problems where we've got mechanical issues with the engine that stop us going any further basically. So first port of call, make sure we've got a good healthy setup. And then we start looking at what's happening during the running of the engine, which is where the rolling road comes in. So unfortunately we can't drive along the road with a gas analyzer behind us. We need to be doing this stationary in a workshop environment where it's controlled and we can monitor all these things and make sure that we capture that data, which helps us to determine what's going on in the engine and if there are any problems, what we can do to correct it. It's a diagnostic tool in that sense. It helps us to identify problems before they become a major, component failure or an engine failure. So it's all about a sort of a proactive way of checking the health of the engine.
Would you mind explaining, just in the interest of this being a fair test for everybody at home to comprehend? So this is a printout essentially of the screen downstairs, and particularly reference like the environmental values and this top figure, which is probably the most important one in terms of like power.
With all rolling roads there are differences, and environmental conditions play a big part in that. If you tested a car on a lovely cold day with a nice dense air, it will produce more power than it would on a hot day at maybe a bit higher altitude. So what we have to do, especially with the Maha dyno, where we use it quite a lot for competition testing, and guys come in and have to be certified that their power is accurate to what they're claiming it to be. So there has to be some kind of ISO tolerance where we use that information to normalise the engine power, so that if you came back in a week or in 6 months in very, very different conditions, we would expect to see very, very similar results. 300
horsepower out the box in that car. It was remapped 12 years ago somewhere and got, I think, 320 horsepower. If we use the top figure, 292 horsepower. So, I mean, is that kind of normal in terms of that drop off in power? And
when we're seeing a 20-plus-year-old engine with 100,000+ miles, it's not really fair to expect it to achieve the same as it did. Often, actually, between 5 and 10% is actually reasonably, normal and that kind of age. So all of the things that we're looking at to make sure we haven't got a very specific problem, we know we don't have that. We've just got a little bit of wear and tear, basically.
Brilliant. Okay, look, I'm happy with kind of stage 1 of our test today. Yeah, we better get on with part 2 of the test.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Left in place on the dyno, and after letting the car cool a little, the guys had swapped out the plastic factory T-shaped plenum for IPD's Y-shaped plenum, before adding back the stock throttle body. Then whipping out the stock panel filter, replaced by the K&N filter, which comes with a 1,000,000-mile warranty.
It's very light.
Done. We're on the aftermath now after fitting the IPD plenum and of course the K&N panel filter.
Yeah.
And we've got some results.
Yeah, first of all, the good news is there's gains across the spectrum from 3,000 RPM all the way up to the red line, which is good news. We're seeing positive results, good air to fuel ratio results as well. So the engine computer, the calibration file is obviously fueling it correctly still, even though we have changed the airflow through the engine. So the engine computer's Still producing good control over the fueling, which is great. We're seeing, generally speaking, the peak there, we've got about 10 horsepower increase at 6,000 RPM, but like I say, more importantly, throughout the whole rev range, we're seeing positive improvements. And this is without any software changes as well to the ECU, so no calibration of the ECU, which I'm sure if you spent more time you could definitely dial it in and smooth out some of the transitions. Most importantly, we've got rid of a lot of the symptoms of heat soak. So we're actually now getting repeatable results where before we were losing a few horsepower here and there. Now we're not really losing anything in the rev range, and that's with no changes in terms of intake and cold air intake and things like that. That's just that the thermodynamics of the engine are just working a bit better, basically.
So the rewards in this instance are twofold. There's a slight increase in power, but most importantly is what we've learned from today. It's that repeatability of performance that we seem to have kind of nurtured now. So
yes, yeah, and it's obviously that the original system does restrict the engine, and by allowing greater volume of air to go through, we are helping it, and that's borne out in the results of performance. But yeah, like I say, repeatability and is the actually most important thing, especially for the enjoyment of driving the car. No one really wants to see the car gradually deteriorate. So yeah, it's good set of results.
Excellent, nice one. Well, Mike, thank you very much for your time today. As I said, it's a brilliant facility. I'm really chuffed to bring the car here, so thank you.
That's no problem at all.
And so to the Helmholtz resonator bypass. The resonator is an area of your 996's airbox which cancels out some engine noise to satisfy drive-by noise regulations. It does this by drawing some induction air into the resonator chamber, the sound frequency of which cancels out some engine noise, and by nature it also restricts the volume of air reaching your engine. Both points are nonsensical in a sports car, so our bypass kit from the nsEOX shop was fitted in minutes. Again, there's a link to the kit in the video description. What an awesome little modification that is, I'll tell you. I'll admit to being slightly dubious about the Helmholtz, or however you say it. I said I'd learn that by the end of the episode. It's not happened, but the Helmholtz, we'll call it, resonator. It looks a bit dubious as a modification at first, reading up about it online. But I have to say, awesome. Particularly in the top half of the tacho. Woo! Yeah, definitely a bit more sound penetrating into the cabin, which is what I wanted really. With all modifications, I never really the clinical side of it isn't high up the agenda for me. It's just how the modification makes you feel, or how the mod makes the car feel. Same with the IPD plenum, to be honest. Again, read a lot online, some people questioning if it works at all, in fact. Well, again, as I hope you realise by now on this channel, I like to do proper journalism as much as I can, or to the best of my ability. So doing something investigative like this, I think is worthwhile, and I hope you all agree. So, I mean, it does work. As I mentioned on a voiceover earlier in the video, some people then go for larger throttle bodies and all the rest of it to really unlock the potential that the IPD helps to do. I haven't done that. I might do it in future. We'll see how it goes. But I mean, for now, I'm just super happy with this car. I just love it. Back to the IPD plenum, and for me, as we saw, the maximum horsepower gain was 10 horsepower at 6,000 RPM. But I mean, there were incremental increases in torque throughout the rev range. I think that is what's most noticeable for me in terms of real world day-to-day driving. It hasn't changed the character of the car per se. It's still what I love about the 3.4 litre Gen 1 M96. It's quite peaky by nature. It rewards you for keeping the revs high. And it still is like that. I wouldn't want that to change, but it just gives me a little bit more oomph lower down, which day to day is good for, say, pulling out of junction. Added to that, the increased resonance that feeds through to my ear holes here, thanks to the resonator bypass. I mean, some fantastic little mods, fairly straightforward to do. You can do it on your drive if you wish. Really worthwhile, I would say. I mentioned earlier on, all of those parts and more are available from the nsEOX.co.uk shop. Please go and check that out. There are over 60,000 parts on there, for any and all Porsche. The last thing I'd like to mention is, you may notice at the bottom of the screen now there's a thanks or a super thanks button. I basically just want to say thanks in advance for any of you that choose to click that button. And look, and help support the channel. I'm not a YouTube vlogger. I don't go around using the camera to tell everybody how brilliant I am and introduce my latest car that I've bought on finance. This channel is all about proper journalism to the best of my ability, all to do with Porsche. The idea is every time you watch one of my videos, you learn something. If I don't feel that's the case, I won't make the video. So I hope you find the channel worthwhile, and if you'd like to say a little thanks by clicking that button, well, it is highly appreciated from me. The very least you can do is to click subscribe, turn notifications on. It means every time I drop a video, you'll see it first. And that's it. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.